Hi, it's Peculus here. It's starting to look a little bit like spring, and with that, of course, always comes the worries that horse people have about fresh spring grass. If you look at a horse's feet, essentially, all the bones of the leg are suspended in that hoof capsule by what we call the lamini. I'll show you in a second. And all of that weight suspended. So you figure when a horse is jumping, let's say, and when they land off a big jump, they land on one foot and they have like that, all of the sort of the weight of the horse, the weight of the rider, all the gravitational sort of impact of jumping and landing on the ground, and yet somehow that all the bones of the leg manage to stay suspended in that hoof capsule. Like, really, when you think about it, the horse's foot is like an engineering miracle, really. It's a fantastic thing. In fact, they say that I read somewhere that there's some scientists that were trying to figure out if they could replicate the lamini, because they could then put it in the structure, in the base of buildings in earthquake zones or something, so that they could actually have the building sort of sway with the movement of the earth without actually collapsing. I'm not sure they had any luck, because if you look inside the hoof capsule, you can see one half of the structure that I'm talking about. So what we're looking at here is what we call the insensitive lamini. So you can see it almost looks like the underside of a mushroom if you look at it. And interlocking with this insensitive lamini is what's called the sensitive lamini. When the lamini in the horse's foot is functioning as it should, that's how the miracle that we were just talking about can take place. I should mention that so many students have touched this over the years that it's a little bit worn out and there's some lint attached to it, but it gives you an idea what the inside of the horse's hoof capsule looks like. The problem, of course, is when that structure breaks down, and there's all sorts of reasons that seem kind of unrelated sometimes of why the lamini will start to break down. The one would be if a horse has a severe colic. Another would be if the horse has Cushing's disease, they're more susceptible to it. If a mare doesn't pass all of her placenta, she can founder or get laminitis, and if they get too much grain. The one that we're going to talk about today is, of course, that they get too much fresh spring grass. And it's hard, like at this time of year, watching them eat the grass. I mean, they just love it, and they look like they're having such a great time with it. But unfortunately, from an evolutionary point of view, the horse was designed to live on way less. Like if you look at wild horses, they're living on forage that's you would never even think could keep anything alive, and yet they seem to thrive on it. So when horses are exposed to just this abundance of fresh grass, their systems are just not set up for it. It kind of reminds me of, what do they used to call gout, the rich man's disease? Not that it's the same thing, but it's that kind of sense of abundance, right? That it's just too much for the system to accommodate. So what do you do about it? Well, unfortunately, for a lot of horses, you have to limit their time on the grass. If a horse has a problem with it, it's probably not worth it. You might just be better to have a grazing muzzle or keep them off it altogether. You feel bad putting a grazing muzzle on a horse at this time of year. It's like, they're in the middle of a candy shop and you're not letting them have any, But boy, if you see a horse suffering from laminitis, it's so much worse that, it's not that hard to put the grazing muzzle on after that. Like, imagine it's like as if your fingernail is being torn away from the bed of your nail, and you can imagine how excruciating that is, and then imagine having to walk on it, right? It's just a horrible thing. So not only would I keep some horses off the grass altogether, and I would put a grazing muzzle on some of them too, but I'm also really conscious of where the horse gains his weight. Like if a horse is overweight, that's already not a good thing to be out on the grass, but if the horse gains his weight, keeps a lot of his weight in his crest, they seem to be very susceptible to founders. That's why you'll find like breeds like Morgans that tend to be kind of crusty, ponies, anything that carries the weight there seems to get into trouble more than like a thoroughbred type. Not that they can't get it, I'm not saying that, but just those are the ones that I kind of keep an eye on in my barn. And I should mention, sometimes we use the term founder and laminitis interchangeably. It really means the same thing, it's just a different way of phrasing it. What I was told years ago is that almost all seafaring nations domesticated horses. just sort of goes together. And so you'll find that there's quite a number of sort of nautical terms involved with horses, and one of them is founder. So like if you have a ship that founders on the rocks, what it essentially means is that the boat has been compromised, and the structure of the boat's been damaged in such a way that it's going to sink now. And founder essentially is sinking, that those bones that, like you see in this diagram, they sort of, the pedal bone or the coffin bone tears away from the wall of the foot, and the foot starts to come right down through. It's a terrible, terrible thing. What's so nice is that it'll start and you can't stop it for some reason. Like we had a little pony mare, and she had Cushing's disease, which was one strike, and then one night she had a really bad colic, and there's 2 strikes. So we were hyper vigilant at that point, because we figured it was very likely she was going to founder, and sure enough she did. And it didn't matter how ready we were, it didn't matter how prepared we were. The vet had given us stuff, the vet was on call, and it didn't matter. We lost that little mare. We had to have her euthanized because that disease took its course and we couldn't stop it. It was just awful. But having said that, you can get lucky sometimes. Like we rescued a horse about, I don't know how many years ago now, and he had foundered really badly. It was sort of a chronic founder for him, and it was awful. And but he was such a great horse to work with. Like he's really an exceptional horse. His name was Hawk, and he was just awesome. And he let you do virtually anything to him, that horse. And he recovered from it, but through huge amounts of work from the people here at the farm. Not me. There was people that really dedicated themselves to Hawk's recovery. It was fantastic, and he survived it. So, if you want to know the story of Hawk, if you go to the section in our blog about books, there's a book about it, but there's also a short video there that you can watch that'll give you an idea what a great horse he was. So sometimes you can get lucky with laminitis or founder, but the best thing is to avoid it if you can, boy, because it's a pretty awful disease. I know that I think a lot of the money in research right now goes to colic and founder in horses, because it would just be so awesome if somebody could get to the bottom of this and figure out a way that we could prevent it from happening. If you have any experience with laminitis or founder and have had any kind of interesting workarounds that you've thought of over the years, let us know in the comments. And in the meantime, have a great week. Remember to thank your horse, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks.